I'll start kind of from a personal place here. And, earlier this week, I went out to Allegany County and I met with some activists on the ground there, Dave and Rebecca and Michelle. And we were talking about water, but we were talking about water in a way that not only intersected with Green Party values and our campaign's platform, but also sort of my evolution as an activist. And a lot of my early activism was related to Latin American solidarity work. And it brought me, meeting with them up in the mountains in Western Maryland, kind of brought me back to some work I had done in El Salvador. I remember being, in a mountain town there, and I was interpreting or translating for a water defender who was kind of putting his life on the line, pushing back against these big multinational mining corporations solely so that his community and other communities in that area would have clean drinking water and it wouldn't all be contaminated by the mines. And so I think, in the US, in Maryland, we're not always at that point where activists in Allegany County or other places are directly risking life and limb, but the temperature is certainly rising out there, and the living conditions are abhorrent, what folks are having to deal with the high cost of water. And so we wanted to spend some time tonight and throughout the campaign shining a spotlight on what's happening in Allegany County outside of some of the areas that have publicly owned and managed water utilities, and in areas where they're paying outrageous water rates. We're talking $400 to $900 a month for water because it's being provided in large part because it's being provided by private corporations who are seeking to profit off of people's ability to bathe, cook food for themselves and their families, and drink a glass of water. So one of the most basic human needs is being commodified for profit. And it's in part a result because of lack of investment at the local and state level in having sufficient infrastructure for water. So the one thing that I think the activists out there have done a really good job, they've created a paper trail. They've gotten some of the local newspapers to start covering this, and they've put a lot of pressure on their local elected officials who out there are almost all Republicans. So folks who are watching from other parts of Maryland that are maybe more used to holding Democrats accountable for the rising cost of their utilities. Or in Baltimore City, we have schools where students can't drink the water, for example. Out there, they're pushing their Republican elected officials to declare or to call on the governor to declare a state of emergency, which would allow for the state to get involved in addressing these unending spiraling costs of water. So there is something that is on the table that Governor Moore could do to provide immediate relief to folks out in Allegany County who are suffering from water bills that are more than their rent, more than their mortgage. Really ridiculous numbers we're talking about here. And we have to ask, why isn't the governor willing to take that action? And we also, as candidates for that office, need to ask ourselves, what can we do to be in solidarity with those folks who are organizing on the ground, who are applying that pressure, who are coming up with solutions, who are doing the research, who are mobilizing, who are showing up to public meetings and hearings, who are, following the money and seeing that some of these costs are a result of mergers and acquisitions that treat a basic human need like water as something that should be commodified for profit. So, shout out to the local organizers that I met with earlier this week. And thank you for teaching me about what's going on out there. We've got a lot more to learn, and we've got we're developing this platform exactly to support the kind of organizing that you're doing there and organizing that will be platforming across the state. So what are some important key facts to keep in mind? As I mentioned before, imagine this your water bill, which most folks are used to seeing in the 2 digits, recently have started to climb into low 3 digits. Out there, some of these water bills are over $500, approaching $1,000 a month. That is not affordable, especially because we know the cost of electricity is going up, cost of eggs is going up, all over we're getting hit in our pocketbooks from left and right. And so there's it's an untenable situation for these folks. And reading some of the descriptions in the local newspapers like the Cumberland Times News, I mean, it makes you want to cry when you hear about folks rationing water, families showering together to save water, not using the indoor toilet, taking water out of streams and creeks nearby, going to the Y or going to Frostburg State to shower. I mean, these are conditions that folks in Maryland, one of the richest states in the country, should not be living in, right? This is not a situation that we should be allowing to continue. And so we across the state should really be showing up and supporting these organizers here who are trying to defend their ability to afford their water on a monthly basis. When we start to ask questions about why these water costs have shot up over the past few months and the last few years, as well as over a couple of decades, we have to follow the money trail. And there was a recent acquisition by the American Water Works company of elements of the Nexus Water Group for $315 million. So, we're talking these small numbers. I only pay $100 a month, or I pay $150 a month for water. There's no profit there, right? Well, if you're saying that, if you're thinking that, then you're fortunate. You have on some level some advantage or some unearned privilege based on where you happen to live, a place where there's a municipal or county water system that, exactly as you may have been thinking, doesn't seek to profit every time you turn on your kitchen sink. But in folks in unincorporated parts of Allegany County who are now paying their water bills to these corporations, that's not the situation they're dealing with. And so when you talk about one publicly traded corporation buying up across an 8-state region utility operations for over $300 million, that they're not investing that kind of money unless they expect to see return on that investment. And that means higher prices for folks in places like Allegany County. And one thing that really hit me when I was out there listening to some of these local activists is that the person sitting to the left of me was paying a different rate than the person to the right. And that's because the person to the right of me lives within city limits in Cumberland, and the person who's sitting to the left of me lives just outside of them. And so part of our platform is to make it easier for folks in their communities to form new municipalities and have those municipalities recognized by the state of Maryland, which is really something that hasn't happened much in the past, half century or so in Maryland. And so when we talk about 1,200 people, those are 1,200 people that we should be in solidarity with. Our campaign should be a platform for them to express their needs and to call on the governor to take all necessary action to address their suffering, because those aren't conditions that anyone in Maryland or really anywhere should be living in.